你有冇試過同朋友分享你生活難題嘅時候，好似越講越沮喪，或者越講越唔知道點樣解決，仲好後悔同佢分享呢？你又有冇試過同另一個朋友講述你生活需要嘅時候，講完之後覺得呢個朋友好明白你嘅感受同處境，而舒服好多呢？原因係你感受到呢個朋友嘅同理心。同理心係理解同感受他人正喺經歷嘅事情，能想像佢自己置身於他人嘅處境，繼而作出適當嘅反應，例如憐憫、哀悼同幫助等。同理心係喺人際關係中一個好重要嘅技能，能俾對方知道你喺佢身邊關心扶持，唔係孤身作戰。咁樣我哋點樣能夠對他人表現出同理心呢？以下有幾個建議：一、認知對方嘅感受，想像一下當自己喺佢處境嘅時候，你會有咩感受呢？二、反映對方嘅感受，當佢分享後，用你自己嘅言語再描述佢嘅感受，然後確定對與否。三、肯定對方嘅感受，我知道你一定好嬲㗎喇，因為你太太睇唔到你為呢個家庭付出好多。四、問開放式嘅問題，去尋求明白對方嘅想法，例如講：我諗我更加明白你嘅處境，請你講多啲俾我聽啦。五、唔好因為對方嘅行為舉動而去判斷一個人。六、一心一意，全神貫注嘅聆聽，唔分心。七、唔提供意見同解決方案，因為當事人係最知道自己嘅情況。佢有能力喺適當嘅時候解決問題。同理心能夠改善你嘅人際關係。喺呢度鼓勵大家喺未來幾個星期一齊練習以上嘅建議。喺聖經羅馬書12章15節提到，要與喜樂的人同樂，要與哀哭的人同哭。
如果你需要情緒上嘅支援，請打角聲逆境同行支援熱線877-316-0760，我哋嘅義工會好樂意聆聽你嘅聲音，讓上帝嘅愛成為你嘅出路。所有談話內容絕對保密。
屋倫角聲中心多年嚟都為低收入嘅人士提供免費嘅報稅服務。舊年因為疫情嘅影響被迫暫停，今年情況較為好轉，我哋就決定憑信心再次為有需要嘅街坊報稅。我哋嘅報稅服務日期係2022年嘅2月7號到4月8號，時間係星期1至5早上10點鐘至到下晝3點鐘。如果你合乎低收入嘅資格，亦都即係話，如果你嘅家庭全年總收入唔超過55,000蚊，你就可以打電話嚟角聲預約㗎啦。不過有幾點係需要注意㗎。第一，角聲嘅報稅服務只係限於標準扣稅類別，我哋係唔接受商業或者自僱報稅服務㗎。另外，為咗保障社區嘅健康，所有進入角聲中心接受服務嘅人士都必須出示不少於2次嘅疫苗注射證明。多謝你合作，我哋感謝你一直支持角聲嘅事工，願上帝賜福俾你。
分享你生活難題嘅時候，好似越講越沮喪，或者越講越唔知道點樣解決，仲好後悔同佢分享呢？你又有冇試過同另一個朋友講述你生活需要嘅時候，講完之後覺得呢個朋友好明白你嘅感受同處境，而舒服好多呢？原因係你感受到呢個朋友嘅同理心。同理心係理解同感受他人正喺經歷嘅事情，能想像佢自己置身於他人嘅處境，繼而作出適當嘅反應，例如憐憫、哀悼同幫助等。同理心係喺人際關係中一個好重要嘅技能，能俾對方知道你喺佢身邊關心扶持，唔係孤身作戰。咁樣我哋點樣能夠對他人表現出同理心呢？以下有幾個建議：一、認知對方嘅感受，想像一下當自己喺佢處境嘅時候，你會有咩感受呢？二、反映對方嘅感受，當佢分享後，用你自己嘅言語再描述佢嘅感受，然後確定對與否。三、肯定對方嘅感受。我知道你一定好嬲㗎喇，因為你太太睇唔到你為呢個家庭付出好多。四、問開放式嘅問題，去尋求明白對方嘅想法，例如講：我諗我更加明白你嘅處境，請你講多啲俾我聽啦。五、唔好因為對方嘅行為舉動而去判斷一個人。六、一心一意，全神貫注嘅聆聽，唔分心。七、唔提供意見同解決方案，因為當事人係最知道自己嘅情況，佢有能力喺適當嘅時候解決問題。同理心能夠改善你嘅人際關係。喺呢度鼓勵大家喺未來幾個星期一齊練習以上嘅建議。喺聖經羅馬書12章15節提到，要與喜樂的人同樂，要與哀哭的人同哭。
如果你需要情緒上嘅支援，請打國聲逆境同行支援熱線877-316-0760，我哋嘅義工會好樂意聆聽你嘅聲音，讓上帝嘅愛成為你嘅出路。所有談話內容絕對保密。
屋倫國聲中心多年嚟都為低收入嘅人士提供免費嘅報稅服務。舊年因為疫情嘅影響被迫暫停，今年情況較為好轉，我哋就決定憑信心再次為有需要嘅街坊報稅。我哋嘅報稅服務日期係2022年嘅2月7號到4月8號，時間係星期1至5早上10點鐘至到下晝3點鐘。如果你合乎低收入嘅資格，亦都即係話，如果你嘅家庭全年總收入唔超過55,000蚊，你就可以打電話嚟國聲預約㗎啦。不過有幾點係需要注意㗎。第一，國聲嘅報稅服務只係限於標準扣稅類別，我哋係唔接受商業或者自僱報稅服務㗎。另外，為咗保障社區嘅健康，所有進入國聲中心接受服務嘅人士都必須出示不少於2次嘅疫苗注射證明。多謝你合作，我哋感謝你一直支持國聲嘅事工，願上帝賜福俾你。
係好，大家好嘛？好快咧，時間過得真係好快，眨下眼咧又到我哋逢星期2嘅呢個國聲嘅傾談8點正，係關於社區服務嘅吓。咁樣我哋咧今日咧就係有阿譚生Robert 同咧佢請到一位嘉賓咧。今日一齊咧就嚟同我哋咧分享呢個工傷，你哋要注意或者係我哋受咗工傷嘅時候應該點做咧？咁一陣間譚生咧就會一一咧同你哋分享噶啦。咁在我哋未開始之先咧，我哋都係要感謝我哋嘅天父，我哋作一個少少嘅祈禱，好嗎？ 好，我哋一齊低頭祈禱。親愛天父，我哋感謝讚美你，神啊，你都俾我哋係每日都喺度享受你所創造嘅呢個世界，更加俾我哋喺大自然裏面嚟到感受呢個世界係無可詆毀、無可推諉，都係神你嘅創造嚟嘅。主啊，我哋亦都現在係經歷緊睇到呢個咁敗壞嘅社會，呢個咁呢個咁有戰亂，又有呢個風暴，又有呢個疫情，真係如果我哋唔係有神你喺度嚟到去倚靠嘅話，我相信我哋都係好彷徨好驚慌。但係神你話叫我哋不用怕，只要信。所以神啊，我哋就係懷着平安嘅心嚟度過每一日，因為我哋知道神你係掌管一切嘅。我哋就照於行神你嘅教訓嚟走每一日嘅道路。我哋更加感謝你俾我哋各星有呢一個嘅機會，能夠分享向我哋嘅弟兄姊妹可以分享唔同嘅信息。我哋就求你今晚繼續臨到我哋嘅中間嚟到指導我哋。我哋亦都求你俾今晚講嘅聽嘅都能夠蒙福。我哋嘅禱告係奉主耶穌基督名求，阿門。好啦，阿 Robert， 你喺度啦嘛？係。
Hello，各位好。
Hello， 好。嗱，今晚阿 Robert 你又請咗位嘉賓嚟嘅噃。
係啊，我唔知佢有冇入到嚟嗰個會議室先。
佢係用佢嘅名 Sean Sweetney 係咪？
係啊，Sean，are you around？OK，未嚟到可能。
希望佢用佢個名咧，咁我哋就睇到佢咧，就會開佢。
因為係啊，我都提咗佢嘅，用個名我哋會見到佢，我俾咗個 number 佢入呢個會議室噶啦。
你唔俾條 link 佢一撳就得喎。
我俾個meeting ID 佢。
哇，唔知得唔得咧？你想唔想我 send 條 link 俾佢啊？
睇下先，睇下佢。等我試下 text 下佢，睇下佢
你 text 佢，然之後就 send 條 link 俾佢咯。你咁
OK。
等。咁Robert 喺度整理緊嘅時候咧，我哋都大家都預備咧一啲問題啦，或者咧喺我哋呢陣間咧係，既然今晚有個嘉賓喺度咧。希望你哋咧就有凡有工傷嘅問題咧，都希望你咧係可以用一個 chat 嗰度寫上嚟又得，或者到時咧我哋發問嘅時候咧，你舉一舉手，我哋就會開你個咪俾你講你嘅 case 係點樣，有啲乜嘢可以要問阿譚生噶啦，好嘛？阿譚生，咁我哋今晚係你會同我哋分享啲乜嘢咧？
其實我咧今晚預備嗰啲咧，都係同我呢位嘉賓傾偈嗰啲話題嚟嘅。咁咧就同大家講嗰啲咧，我諗咧都講咗都唔少噶啦。我呢半年一年之內咧，都同大家講咗好多關於，如果你係受傷工人，你如果受傷應該點樣做啊嗰啲咧。我如果係有邊啲跟住我每次聽我講嘅咧，大概都心入邊咧都會有一個概念噶啦。我咧就唔想咧講得太清楚俾你嘅，因為咧每個人個 case 咧都有啲唔同。如果你聽咗我講，用咗人哋嘅例嚟入當自己個 case 咁做咧，可能有時會就做得唔啱。咁所以咧我就係俾個概念大家嘅啫，我唔係俾實在一定係跟到足我咁講嘅。
係啊，個個都唔同噶嚇。
係啊，咁咧就咁我依家就仲係等緊我嗰位朋友睇下上唔上到嚟，我又 check 咗佢 佢又好似冇乜反應，咁唔知係咪塞車咧？
唔係啊，因為咧你要俾條 link 佢就易啲咯。你俾個 number 佢咧，我驚住佢打漏一個字，你知好鬼長噶嘛。
OK，嗱，咁我不如我俾個你 check 俾你先嚇。
嚇，你 forward 俾我啦，然之後我 send 條 link 俾
OK，
佢啦。
好，我俾個 number 你嚇。
嚇
收唔收到？
我睇下。你係打去你 text 俾我定咩啊？
我喺個 chat 嗰度send 俾你。OK，我又可以用嗰個手機 text 俾你啦。
如果你係 check 嗰度咧，阿 Susie 可以幫手 send 嗰條 link 俾佢啊。
好。
嗱，我啱啱 send 咗俾你啊，阿 Lilian 啊。
OK。咁啊，Robert 你可以介紹下先，我而家就 send 俾佢。
哦，OK，係啊，我今日先同佢講個電話，佢話可以我叫佢大概8:05啊8:07咁上下同我哋 connection 嘅。
係，咁你打算係佢會同我哋講解啲乜嘢咧？
我諗咧佢喺樹咧，我先至講啦，因為而家如果佢唔喺樹嘅話咧，我講咗出嚟咧，我係揾啲問題咧，係佢先至識答嘅，所以今次比較嘅資料咧就係資訊咧係比較深少少嘅，係唔係好似平時咁簡單嘅？咁佢嚟到之前咧，我就唔想要賣個關子先，就
好
唔同大家講字啦，希望你可以收得到嚇。
嚇，咁我哋咧試下咧，可唔可以試下咧？就
嗱，我試下問下你哋大家咁多位先，你哋有冇一啲即刻嘅問題？聽咗我咁多次講座啦，有冇一啲你自己有啲疑問嘅，可以隨時喺依家係啱啱好時間，我暫時可以等佢嗰個時候咧，你可以發問。
係有冇人啊？可以舉手，我哋就開你嘅咪。咦，我都咁怕醜啊！佢都唔聽話。
係啦，唔知點解佢
available. The mailbox is full and cannot accept any messages at this time. Goodbye.
唔知咩事情發生，OK，咁我就當佢甩底先啦。如果保險公司你 file 咗個 case 之後，佢覺得有啲疑問，書面上咧亦都係講得唔好咁清楚，佢就決定咧稱你上去問話嚇，嗰個叫 deposition。佢 depose 你咁樣嘅話，你點樣去準備咧？有咩你要注意咧？點解我會咁講咧？因為最近咧，我依家幫緊一位朋友個 case，咁佢係受咗傷，但係咧佢受咗傷之後咧發生嘅嘢咧，啲人有啲好唔了解嘅。例如佢原來受咗傷之後咧，佢翻咗中國。
哦。
OK 呢啲嘢。
但係佢報咗工傷未啊？
報咗工傷，但係報咗工傷之後咧就冇喺呢度睇醫生，就走咗翻中國。咁走咗翻中國咧，你就算我哋點中意中醫都好啦，中醫喺美國嚟講咧唔係咁承認嘅。咁如果佢唔承認嗰個時候咧，就變咗咧，佢對你嗰個案件，你其實有咩受傷，佢就會好大疑問啦。咁咧就呢個咧就係呢個咧差唔多係好梗咗，你諗住佢會稱你去問話都得㗎啦。OK， 而且佢唔係淨係翻咗大陸喎，翻咗去中國咧超過1年添啊。
即係唔係淨係翻去度假，即係去1-2個月。
係。
去。
咁翻咗去1年嘅話，任何情況都可以發生嘅，係咪？你即係。係啊。Yeah. Oh, hello. I think we got an audio.
Yeah, 阿 Son 喺度啦嚇，阿 Susie 開佢個咪啦。
Hi, Son.
Hi.
Hi, Robert.
How are you doing?
I'm sorry to keep you waiting. I'm doing well. How are you?
No problem. I thought you were stuck in traffic. So nice having you here today. Okay, it's very it's hard to. I know that you have very busy schedule.
Yeah. Thanks so much. This is Lillian. I did you receive my the link I sent you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, now Mr. Sweeney is an applicant attorney. What is an applicant attorney? Is the attorney who represent the injured worker. 嗱，Mr. Sweeney 先生咧係一個律師，呢個律師咧就唔係同保險公司做嘅，佢係同受傷工人做嘅，所以佢係幫受傷工人呢邊嘅。OK， 我哋今日咧好開心咧，就得到佢喺度幫我哋解答問題。Mr. Sweeney, do you have any disclaimer that you want to announce before we start?
Sure. Well, first, I thank you, Robert, and thank you everyone for having me tonight virtually. And I'd say that the things we discussed tonight are only my opinions in my professional experience, but obviously there's no attorney-client privilege or anything like that. It's more of a general roundtable. So that's the extent of the disclaimer.
OK， Mr. Sweeney 話咧，佢今晚嘅意見咧係佢本人嘅意見，唔係代表一個一定嘅意見。仲有每個 case 咧個情況唔同，好似我正話講下，所以咧就唔好你揸住佢講啲嘢咧就當晒係啱晒嚟 apply to 你個 case 嗰度。OK， so Mr. Sweeney, what I have been doing the last year or so, I try to give some information to the viewers so they know that if in case that they have a work injury, what should they do? So so now that they probably have a general idea of what should they do. For example, they will file with the employer, things like that, and then start seeing a doctor, something like that. So they understand this. So so today I told them that I'm gonna ask you some specific question that only attorney can answer. Is that fair?
Sure.
OK 嗱，我正話同 Mr. Sweeney 講咧，我今晚咧就因為佢喺處咧，我就今晚問佢啲問題咧，就係、只係律師先識答嘅啫。咁就大家你就比較留意下佢講啲嘢嚇。咁你就如果有咩問題嘅話，即刻舉手可以我即刻問佢啊。
係啦，係啦，係啦。
So Mr. Sweeney, so we were talking about deposition. I give them an example. If there is an injured worker who got injured, but then after he was injured, he went back to China instead of getting treatment here. So that is a very good example that the insurance company will try to depose him. For whatever information that they want to get because you're not treating with a doctor here in the United States. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it's a fair assessment that they would want to take a deposition to get that information as to if the treatment was all exclusively out of the country.
Right. OK. Mr. Sweeney 咧同意講，佢話如果你翻咗去大陸或者出咗國嘅話咧，佢想知道下你喺第二度嘅情況，你點樣醫嘅情況。Now, do you think that the doctor in another country would they accept that kind of treatment record, or do they just can ignore it and then just treat that is not credible?
Sorry, will you ask it again?
Well, I was asking that if the person went back to China and got a Chinese doctor treat him, for example, for 6 months or a year, and then come back and claim that he was treated by a Dr. So-and-so over there, there's a chance that insurance company would take that doctor's record as credible record?
I think it's possible. Yeah, I mean, it would just depend on the documentation.
OK. Mr. Sweeney 話咧，都有可能有機會咧，佢哋都會承認嗰個喺中國嘅醫生嗰啲診症嗰啲記錄嘅。OK. So now if somebody receive a depositions order from the court, of course it's from the court, right? Or from the defense attorney, what should he do?
Well, I think it would be good to see about having an attorney represent you if it's only even for the deposition itself. Even if someone wanted to be in pro per, they can do that, but you could still have a workers' comp attorney who could get paid by the insurance company for fees under the labor code. And then that person would at least have some protection and a better idea of what to expect and what things to look out for in a deposition process.
Are you talking about information and assistant office people, or are you talking about a real attorney?
So information assistance office is always a good resource to contact, but my firm, for example, has had cases where we would step in just for the deposition of people who were representing themselves.
Okay.
Or doing that with the help of the information assistance officer. And then we otherwise limited the agreement to that we would help with the deposition, and that was that.
So this is kind of a special appearance kind of arrangement, right?
Right.
OK. 咁Mr. Sweeney 話咧，如果你係冇律師代表嘅話咧，法庭咧就會派一個律師，淨係代表你，即係代表你去見對方個律師問話嗰個時候嘅，就唔係代表晒你成個 case 嘅。即係嗰次你面對住嗰個俾人問話嗰陣時候咧，佢會派人個代表你。Do you think that kind of arrangement would you think that that attorney who only served for one occasion would know enough to protect the applicants from saying the wrong thing or doing dumb things like that?
I mean, I couldn't say because you would generally want someone who has the whole file and knows the medical history and chronology of the client. However, I'd say that at least in terms of preparing for what answers to kind of keep brief and not go on run on versus the few questions where it can be helpful to at least know more of the activities of daily living that are relevant to permanent disability at the end of the case. So I think your question is a good one, and that would be a concern. But I would still, if it were my family member or friend, I would rather them have the protection of an attorney going through what to expect the deposition process than someone going through it cold.
Right. Okay. So let me explain. So Mr. Sweeney 話咧，如果你係冇律師嘅話咧，就算任何一個律師咧，都識得咧保護你到某一個程度。當然，如果你係由頭到尾請咗個律師嘅，佢知道你嘅 case 嘅話，佢就更加會容易咧知道點樣會保護到你。如果唔係咧，你就算係識得你冇幾耐時間嘅話咧，佢哋都應該有經驗咧，可以俾到你有限程度嘅保障。Okay. Now, I know that a lot of the insurance company like to lead. You know the meaning of lead, right? I want to lead you to say something, right? Would that part of the thing that the attorney who represent the applicants would be able to cut that off or object to it, things like that?
Yeah, you would be able to object to it. And also, a lot of times what they'll do with the leading questions is they'll be asking a question for a second time that's already been asked and answered.
Right.
And it can be helpful to have an attorney there, or just for the person going through the deposition in general, to keep the answers short and just respond to the question is kind of the most important thing, in my opinion.
OK。佢話咧，有時咧，保險公司個律師咧就會揾啲問題咧，就等你去中落個陷阱度講啲錯嘢㗎。呢啲嘢咧就即係你睇戲都睇得好多啦。即係佢帶到你一個情況之後咧，你哋又答錯嘢，答到啲嘢咧就對你個 case 不利嘅。咁但係咧就如果個律師係夠料嘅咧，佢應該可以知道咧就點喺邊度方面就救翻你出嚟。But I heard that some people say that they will say that you can object, but I need an answer because the judge will decide whether he would accept that statement or not. Is it always true? Or is that just part of the fantasy?
So that's possible, but there's sometimes, including when it pertains to someone's immigration status, where I'll just tell the person not to answer the question whatsoever.
Okay.
So it depends.
So
there
actually,
are times when, yeah.
So actually, the attorney can advise the client not to answer at all, instead of what me saying that you have to answer. Let the judge decide whether he will accept. So that's a two different scenario, right?
That's right.
Okay. 咁Mr. Sweeney 話咧，有時咧嗰個你個律師咧，即係代表你嗰個咧，會叫你咧唔好答。但係有啲情況之下咧，對方就會話你答啦。嗰個法官第日一睇到呢個供詞之後咧，佢會決定咧要唔要你個供詞。咁所以兩方面咧都會有會呢個情況會發生嘅。So how do you prepare your client before a deposition?
So the most important thing for me before a deposition is, first of all, explaining to them that about 50% of my cases, the deposition will be taken of the injured worker. And so I want them to know that this is just part of the normal process of pursuing the claim. The second thing that's important is advising them that short answers that are just responding to the question is the easiest way to get through the process. Because if there's information that I want to come out that I think helps prove up the case in any way, I can always ask that question at the end. But it's much better to not be giving run-on answers or adding information that wasn't part of the question, because then it just gives that many more roads and avenues for the defense to go by.
I think this is very important point, because a lot of people try to explain, and the more they explain, the the deep the hole they dig into it, the more. So yeah,
Right.
that's yeah, okay. Any other advice other than this?
The other thing I would say is it's important to go over the person's medical history preceding the injury, and knowing what, for example, if there is an injury to the same body part before or a problem before that body part, it's better to know those facts before the deposition and talk with the client about it. Um, and then the questions don't come up in a way that's as potentially damaging for apportionment purposes when it comes to permanent disability at the end of a work injury.
Right. Okay. Let me explain. Okay.
Mhm.
Mr. Sweeney 話咧，你佢如果係同你預備你去deposition 之前咧，佢就會話俾你聽咧，盡量咧答嗰啲問題咧係短簡單。佢問你一樣就答一樣，最少嘅字，唔好咧就好似解釋係唔需要嘅。佢問你一句你就答一句，係咁多。唔需要話因為咁，所以我答你呢啲係會搞到自己咧，有時咧會好問題嘅，好麻煩嘅。仲有咧，佢話咧佢會咧嗰、個你嘅律師會同你咧翻查你自己啲記錄、啲健康記錄，同你咧 go over 佢，即係話咧你睇下嗱，你嗰陣時咧就1月1號受傷，1月10號就睇醫生，睇咗3個月，做咗啲乜嘢咁嗰啲咧，佢會同你go over，等你記得，即係 remind 你嗰陣時做過啲乜嘢。But then I also know that the defense lawyer always asks you what kind of material do you have gone through before the deposition. So you really have to tell them what you have read, right? Things like that, right?
Yeah, that's right. And the deposition should be just the individual's independent recollection. So it's good to do a little bit of going back and looking at any records you say or you might have from your treating doctor, et cetera. But it isn't like you want the witness should never be there with notes in their hands or anything along those lines.
Oh,
It should
okay.
just be what they can specifically recall.
OK OK 有一樣嘢好重要嘅就係話咧，你要俾人問話嘅時候咧，你唔可以帶埋你啲筆記喺面前咧讀㗎。你係個手裏邊咧乜嘢紙都唔可以拎住㗎。佢問你咩咧，你就要用你嘅記憶力嚟去答佢。如果唔係咧，你就好似咧喺度交功課咁抄嘢嗰啲係唔可以㗎。OK so why is that so that you cannot bring notes for yourself? Is that just a way of showing that you are you are not cheating?
Basically, yes. And I guess another thing that's important about it for practical purposes is if a case ever does go to a trial, that's going to be the same type of testimony that will be taken in front of the judge, is with the individual just sitting there and testifying, where they won't have like notes for any of that. It'll just be a matter of what they recall on that day, and that's part of the whole question of the judge getting to in terms of credibility.
Right. Okay. So the deposition is almost like a real trial, except that you're not there. You use your deposition as the testimony, right?
That's right.
Okay. 佢話咧就其實咧係問話嗰時候咧入邊講嗰啲嘢咧係變咗就呈堂證供嚟㗎。以後如果有乜嘢要喺個上到法庭嗰時候咧，佢就會用你講嗰啲嘢拎出嚟咧俾法官睇，即係話嗱，佢呢位先生咧就受傷工人咧已經係講咗咁嘅嘢，咁就呢啲係佢證供啦咁樣嘅。OK，so how does the deposition go from the beginning? So what do they do first?
Usually they're just going to start with your name, where you live, and go through what I will hear people do a lot of times. They'll confirm name, location, where you live, family size, like how many people live in your household, and then they'll go backwards in time. Usually, or sometimes they'll do it the other way around. They'll go from about when someone's 18, high school age, and ask them questions from there about their history, and in particular, anything that has to do with a personal injury claim, another workers' comp issue, or some other physical injury that or problem that preceded the onset of the work injury.
OK。So Mr. Sweeney 話咧，你如果開始嗰陣時候咧，佢通常咧就問你個名啦、地址啦、喺邊度住啦、你仲有你啲教育程度啦，你幾時開始做工嘅，幾時受傷啊咁樣樣，會問到你屋企嘅情況添嘅，有時會 OK。咁咧就然後咧就即係嗰啲嘢全部都係同你個案件有關，可能有關嘅，佢都會問你嘅 OK。
你係咪講喺法庭上邊啊？
唔係，而家講緊都係 deposition， 都係問話嗰度嘅啫。嗱，我哋話個法庭上邊咧，佢哋又只係話你 deposition 嗰啲講嗰啲嘢咧，會第日拎上去做證供嘅。你講嗰啲嘢咧，就已經係當你喺個法庭上面講咗噶啦。
咁嗰個 deposition 係喺邊個面前做啊
？Oh yeah，Lillian asked who is the applicants facing at the deposition in terms of people around them who are present.
So generally speaking, it's just going to be the attorney who represents the insurance company, the court reporter who's taking down all the responses from the injured worker, and then the applicant's attorney.
OK，佢話咧就係啦，問話嗰個時候，通常咧就喺間房入邊咧就有你嗰個俾人問話嗰個受傷工人嗰個律師啦，保險公司嘅律師啦。仲有就係咧一個 court reporter， 就係佢做 shorthand 嘅啲人，你哋喺度撳下啲機，咁啊錄晒你啲音，你講啲嘢佢就記錄晒，拎翻出嚟就會知道你講咩㗎啦。So yeah, okay, all right. So now I have seen people asking question not just 1 or 2 hours. They just keep going and going and going. Sometimes over 8 hours. Well, in rare case, okay. So they must have something that they really want to dig into. So what should the injured worker do if he think that is too much, too tiring, or need to take a break, or need to go back tomorrow, things like that? So what should he do?
Yeah, so thankfully I have not yet had any depositions that have gone longer than about 3 to 4 hours. But I personally would talk with the defense attorney. The injured worker could talk to the attorney beforehand or during, if it's been a few hours, and say, hey, what time is this supposed to be done? Because if it's going to go beyond, say it started at 8 in the morning, you're already at 12. I think it's completely reasonable to ask for a continued date where they can go back if they really have that many more questions to try and get through.
Right.
But the injured worker should not, in that situation, they shouldn't hesitate to make a reasonable request that they continue to another date, because 4 hours or more is a really long time for a deposition.
Yeah. 咁咧就Mr. Sweeney 話咧，如果係呢個 deposition 係長過4個鐘頭嘅話，通常咧佢哋都會咧暫停㗎啦，等住第二日再繼續咁樣嘅，因為咧4個鐘頭已經係好長嘅時間咧，個個都會好攰㗎啦。OK。
咁啊 ，Robert 嗱，我想問咧，你呢個 deposition 咧係邊個要求開呢個 meeting 咧，還是係喺咩情況下？即係中文係點樣理解呢個字啊
？Lillian asked, who usually initiate the deposition? I would guess it's the defense, right?
Yeah, the defense is usually the person who wants to do deposition.
So sometimes the applicant side also can depose other people. So who would that person be, like a doctor, things like that?
Yeah, usually doctors are the ones that I'm noticing and setting the depositions for, because one, if I disagree with the doctor's opinion, then you can use the deposition to try and get them to change their opinion or to show that.
Oh, I see.
their opinion isn't substantial evidence.
Okay. So if you don't like the answer and you try to drill them, it's really not a good idea, right? Because it shows that you are really aggressive. Is that correct?
Yeah, probably. It really depends on the way they're responding to the questions, because I think generally speaking, it's not good to be combative with the doctors. You can try and lead them to the point you're trying to make.
Right.
But there's also times when the doctors themselves are being very combative or seem like they're being intellectually dishonest with some of their answers.
Right.
And when that's the case, you can let them do a little bit digging of their own, because if they say the wrong thing and their opinions just are not conforming with what workers' comp law is, then I'd make the argument down the road at a trial, if it went to trial, that the judge can't rely on those opinions because they're not substantial.
Okay, but you have to have your opinion. You have to have your fact, reason why you want to exclude that testimony, right? You have to have a reason, right?
Right.
Okay. Mr. Sweeney 話咧，有時咧，對方即係保險公司嘅律師咧，就係通常係佢咧就要求受傷工人咧係未問話嘅，但係如果調翻轉頭咧，受傷工人嗰個律師咧，佢都會有時咧會覺得咧醫生嗰啲報告啊或者講啲嘢咧係未必係好準確，咁佢哋就會咧要求嗰個去問嗰個醫生，同你睇病嗰個醫生，或者同你點講啊 evaluate 嗰個即係評估嗰個醫生出嚟問話係。意見都係一樣嘅意思，即係話你有咩唔明嘅話咧，你就會追佢嚟問嚇。Now, are there any difference between the kind of question that either attorney can ask, or is it like it's a trial? You know that the redirect you cannot do certain thing compared to the first part of the question. So in that position, there's no such restriction, right?
I'm sorry, could you ask the question again? I didn't hear all of it.
Okay, yeah, I know that during a trial, if somebody is at the stand and you ask them question, and then the other attorney asks them a question, and then you do a redirect, there's some certain kind of a restriction that you cannot ask, during a trial. But there's no such restriction in a deposition, right? You can just ask any question related to the case. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's less restrictive at the deposition phase.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. All right. So usually what happened after the deposition?
So usually after the deposition, if it hasn't happened already, then the injured worker should be evaluated by either a qualified medical evaluator, an agreed evaluator, or in the right circumstance, a treating doctor, if the treating doctor writes sophisticated enough reports where you could get a final report that you could take to trial if you needed to. That's usually the next thing after the deposition that needs to happen.
Okay. 嗱，通常咧問咗話之後咧，跟住咧就佢哋咧就會咧睇一個鑑證醫生噶啦。我講咗鑑證醫生講咗好多次，呢個咧亦都係一個即係跟住嘅程序，通常都係睇鑑證醫生嘅。咁啊，如果你哋通常你哋係如果佢問你嘅咧，多數係對你嘅案件咧點樣受傷啊，以前係咩事嘅咧，佢會咧就即係 pay attention to 對於個案件係有冇咩嘅。即係佢覺得你哇，如果佢啱啱舊年先至係傷過嘅，今年又傷過同埋個地方嘅話咧，佢就覺得咧你可能咧今次受傷嗰啲情況咧係由舊年咁嚟㗎啦。即係呢啲咁嘅情況咧，佢又要喺嗰個 deposition 嗰度咧就解決咗一半，但係咧仍然咧係要揾個鑑證醫生嚟咧同你做檢查，先至知道咧你其實係有冇因為以前受傷而引起嗰個傷勢嘅。I was trying to explain to them that they might have different work injuries in the past. So after the deposition, then they will be sent to a qualified medical examiner, QME or AME, in case they are too attorneys side by side to discuss it, and then things like that to verify whether they have apportionment issue, right? Is that correct?
Whether they have a what issue?
Apportionment issue.
Yeah, that's right.
OK OK，咁呢啲咧，Mr. Sweeney 都同意，佢就話咧就要呢個鑑證醫生嚟咧就決定咧，其實有冇啲係以前嘅傷勢嚇。Now I know that if in the improper situation, the injured worker has the right to choose the specialty, but in a represented case where both sides are represented by a lawyer, they cannot they don't have the same advantage to the injured worker because they have to agree on a specialty. So how do you go about choosing the right specialty for the injured worker as a applicant's attorney yourself?
Yeah, what I would say is the panel process is weird, that you go through the state's medical unit in order to try and get your specialty issued. And you have to look at the time frames really, really closely for when your first day you're allowed to order according to the labor code and the California Code of Regulations.
Right.
So I will usually try and have the day in mind after looking at the calendar and seeing what day is the first day my office can put in the request. And I'll even have my office request it either like at 5:01 in the evening, which technically is the next business day for when the panel is requested, or really early on the first day when the panel can be requested. I would say also that generally speaking, I have better results when my panel specialty is chiropractor, pain medicine, or physical medicine and rehabilitation.
Okay.
Those special, like, you can get a bad panel in any specialty, but those typically give you the best options. And orthopedic surgery is usually the most anti-worker QMEs in my experience.
Right. Yeah, I can understand that because if they don't have a surgery, they don't have any business. So they will say you're okay, right?
Right. Or if the orthopedic surgeon did surgery, then they think it's fixed. Like,
yes. Yes. We'll talk about the Fresno doctors. Remember the Fresno doctors? Yeah. So,
exactly.
OK，我解釋俾大家聽先。咁Mr. Sweeney 話咧，佢嘅經驗上邊咧，邊種醫生咧係對受傷工人最有利嘅？第一係脊椎神經醫生，第二就係 pain management，即是話同人止痛嗰啲，有啲 doctor 係專係同人止痛嘅，係 MD 嚟嘅。第三就 physical therapist，即係同人做
物理治療。
呢三種嘅醫生咧係做出嚟嘅報告咧係對從受傷工人係最有利嘅。最唔好嘅咧就開刀醫生啦。好似我咁嘅以前講開話，佢如果佢冇機會開刀咧，你冇事。OK， 你一係就俾佢開刀，一係就冇，即係咩事都冇。所以佢嘅經驗嚟講咧，你如果一揾到個開刀醫生嚟同你做鑑證咧，你個 case 咧可能會咧即係嗰個價值咧會跌低咗都唔定。
哦，因為嗰個開刀醫生話你唔需要開刀，或者你唔肯開刀，咁就變咗就係咩啦？係咪？
就冇事啦，係啦。
冇事啦，
Yeah, I have seen because I think only about 10% of the people who got injured are candidates for surgery. Most of them are soft tissue injury. Takes a long time to rehab, to recover. So that is exactly what the applicants want to get the most benefit out of it. Not I'm saying not in the wrong way, in the right way. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so explain the question again. I don't know if I followed all of it.
Okay, I think I answered your question. You answered my question already. Is that we both agree that chiropractor, pain medicine, physical therapist are the kind of a doctor you are trying to get as your legal doctor
Gotcha.
to help your case. But now, if you're facing a defense lawyer who's objecting to your selection of a chiropractor, how do you compromise?
So, what I'll do a lot of times, if I get a panel that I think is favorable to my client, then all of a sudden the defense is much more willing to talk reasonable, agreed evaluators with me. So I won't necessarily insist on having to do the chiro or pain specialist QME if the defense is going to make an agreement for an evaluator who I think is fair and reasonable. But there's not really the timing of the panel request is the most important thing when you're represented.
Right.
And when you're not, the defense will do a lot of complaining about saying, you know, I don't think the chiropractor is correct to assess this injury.
Right.
But if you look at the language from the cases
code
that I've interpreted, and from the labor code and code regulations, it just says that the specialty evaluator can't be inappropriate to assess the injury. I'm paraphrasing, but it says something along those lines.
Right.
And so even if the defense is whining about the specialty, if the person, that doctor, is not inappropriate to evaluate it in the context of the injury, then they don't have a leg to stand on to get the specialty changed.
Right.
Usually, panel specialty challenges are usually just bluffs.
Oh, okay. So your strategy is to send in the panel request as soon as possible, so that they get your request first, right? Is that correct?
That's as soon as possible according to the time frame laid out in the labor code and regs. But yes.
Right. So okay. Mr. Sweeney 話咧，佢點樣可以咧得到自己需要嗰種專長咧？個醫生啊，揀到一係就脊椎神經醫生，俾個痛症或者師，佢就會咧一開始咧就即刻入紙去嗰個叫 medical unit 嗰度，即係 medical unit 咧就係有我所有嗰啲 doctors specialty 喺晒樹嘅，咁你就佢可以揀邊種，即係佢唔會俾時間對方有時間咧叉隻手落去先，佢 request 咗先，佢要求咗先咧，咁咧就會保障到佢咧揾到一個佢中意嗰個專長個醫生啦。Okay. So yes, we talk about QME for long time exclusively because that's the most important part of the process because that is the report that you need to get in order to substantiate your case for impairment, for your disability and things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Now, usually that you cannot finish all the evaluation in one visit because the case may be ongoing, maybe the injured worker has a long way to rehab. So what else can you do except getting patients to be patient?
Well, I mean, what you can do, if necessary, is you can try and get the information from a treating doctor instead. Or you could try and get information you need from the QME or treating doctor via deposition itself instead of waiting for another written report. So if, for example, you thought there was an argument that someone should be on temporary disability and it hadn't been picked up and there was some urgency, you could take the deposition of a treating doctor or the QME themselves to see if you can get the answer you need and get those benefits turned on.
哦，OK，佢話咧有時咧你個醫生咧又未俾到 appointment 你又要繼續要睇醫生，咁咧最好嘅方法咧就係咧 set deposition 嗰個醫生，等佢喺當面話俾你聽你想問佢啲咩，佢當面答到俾你咧，咁就好過咧慢慢排期咁咧，有排都睇唔到個醫生咧，咁就變咗咧你個 case 咧就會咧等到好耐啦。OK，so we are good that we are going to this far. Do we have enough time? Lady Lillian.
我諗我哋仲有5分鐘，睇下大家有冇問題啊？
你有冇問題啊，Lillian？
係啊，我就想問咧，如果係呢個 deposition 咧，呢個所謂問話咧，係喺邊個時候，即係站喺嗰個 patient injured 呢個 worker 嚟講咧，喺邊個時候係最適宜去申請呢一個 deposition 咧？
呢個唔係佢申請嘅，係嗰啲律師想問佢嘢嘅。Now, yes, let me get to one point that I want to make. Sean, if there is some information that the injured worker actually wants to relate to the parties in a subtle way, would applicant's attorney, how would he do? I don't think he would suggest a deposition to his own client. What would he do to kind of let this information out to the other party? There are cases like that.
What type of information that the injured worker would want to come out?
我哋有一個人有問題啊，係咪舉手啊？Susie，請佢開咪啊。
We have a question for you from the audience, so go ahead.
係啊，我講中文啦，我又識啲英文，不過有陣時唔係好清楚。不如for example，如果 someone injured the knee, when about attorney, do you get the attorney before you file the worker comp, or when is a good time to get an attorney, or do you have to get an attorney when you file income worker comp?
I think we have a question. The question is, if somebody injured her knee, KNEE, okay, should she ask to file the injury claim with the employer first, or should she go ahead and find an attorney first?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's a right answer one way or the other. It's good after an injury's happened to not waste any time in reporting it. And it's also important, like you guys have probably talked about in other sessions, to go get treatment, even if that's through your own insurance, not through the workers' comp. But I think it can go either way. Sometimes getting an attorney involved early on seems to make the insurance more on guard. Other times, if it's a straightforward case or someone's injured but looks like they're going back, it can be easier to have an attorney on both sides.
Right. Okay. Mr. Sweeney 話咧冇一個肯定嘅答案嘅，有時咧就係揾咗律師先好，有時咧就係 file 咗先好，就係 depend on the situation。但係咧佢話咧，你喺個 labour code 度咧係你可以有權咧睇咗醫生先嘅。Now the problem is Mr. Sweeney, a lot of the doctor when you go there and said I'm work injury, they stop seeing you because I have to get authorization before I see you. But that's the big minus. How can you get treatment? It takes several days at least or a week to get a claim number to start treating. So most of them will just turn you away. So how do you solve that kind of problem?
Well, if my client is on Medi-Cal or has private insurance or Medicare, I tell them to go get treatment through those avenues. There's nothing wrong with getting treatment through other forms of insurance.
Okay.
Just because there's a workers' comp claim.
Yeah.
Okay.
The doctor's offices will give you pushback because they end up having to file liens against each other to sort out who should be covering the treatment.
Right.
But the injured worker is not doing anything wrong if I go to Kaiser for my knee injury, even though I have an open claim.
Right.
Kaiser and the doctors might ask me and try and discourage me from doing it and say, oh, this should be Kaiser Occupational Clinic. But I tell my clients they should still go and get that care because frankly, it's better for them and their prospects of recovering from the injury if they're getting some treatment, not waiting around through workers' comp. And getting the treatment is also evidence that helps preserve any injury claim that can be pointed to.
Yeah, actually, what I advise them to do, just go to the emergency room. They always treat you.
Yeah.
OK， Vicky Mr. Sweeney 話咧，你可以用你其他個熱所嚟睇咗先，然後咧就等佢有個睇咗你先，咁佢第日咧收唔收到錢咧，佢一定會搞掂嘅，佢會寫張欠單落去嗰個 case 度，因為你唔係你啱啱受傷咧，佢未有嗰個資料嘅，即係咩 claim number 啊，邊個係 adjuster things like that，咁咧遲啲先至會做翻嗰啲手續咧，就會對你好啲，因為咧你係如果受咗傷唔即刻去醫咧，有時咧對佢身體唔好，咁呢就係佢嘅答案啦。OK。
actually 受傷咗，然後你等個 claim and finally 你 get approved，and then 要做手術。
OK，all right，OK。
你咁樣 in this case，佢做手術要唔要揾律師啦？That's the question.
Okay. Miss Young asked if it turned out that she needs surgery, is work related. Should she look for applicants to help her, or should she remain in proper?
I think it's usually safer to have an applicant's attorney. But one thing that she should consider that we talked about earlier is if she hasn't already gotten a panel QME, she might want to request that now in one of those specialties.
Right.
Because if she has goes through that in pro per, she can, for example, get a chiropractor as the QME.
Yes.
Once you go to that appointment with the QME,
right.
Then you could sign up with an attorney, and they would still remain your evaluator.
Right. That's very important. Vicky 佢話咧，你就算揾律師都好咧，好似我以前講，你自己揾咗個鑑證醫生先，係你中意嗰個專長。咁譬如 chiropractor 又好 ，pain management 又好 ，physical therapist 又好咧，佢哋咧會寫嗰啲報告咧，以後會幫助你多啲嘅。咁你揾咗之後咧，以後先至再揾律師咧，個律師咧，佢哋都唔會話踢咗你個鑑證醫生走嘅，佢會用翻你揀嗰個嘅。因為如果係俾你個律師揀嘅話咧，如果一有律師代表嘅話咧，佢就要同對方咧商量過同意先至可以揾個鑑證醫生噶啦。咁咧你就少咗嗰個權噶啦，咁就
你點樣揾 QME 啊 ？How do you find the QME？
你
我遲少少先同你講啦 ，OK？
你哋留意阿 Vicky 留意我哋阿譚生再上嚟嘅時候咧
，OK，
佢以前已經講過㗎啦嚇。咁我哋
我發冇聽啊 ，sorry。
唔緊要，我會再同你講。So Mr. Sweeney, we are really thankful that you are here tonight. For us, if time goes real fast, it's already an hour. So thank you very much for your time. I know that you are very busy at night and the day also that you have your family to take care. So did you have dinner?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm fed. Don't worry. Thanks for having me.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
I hope it was helpful.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
You all take care. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
好啦，嗱，大家我哋今晚時間又過得真係快啦，咁樣咧，而家時間又到啦，咁我哋記得聽晚咧就係談花說草啦。聽晚你哋有啲園藝嘅問題咧，就上嚟我哋傾談8點正。我哋下個禮拜二咧又到我哋嘅社區服務咧，係講有關你嘅 IHSS 啊，你嗰啲我哋最近講緊呢個低收入房屋啊各樣嘅嘢，咁希望咧大家留意或者有問題咧就預備上嚟問任何嘅福利問題都 OK 嘅。咁我哋今晚到此為止啦，拜拜，多謝晒，多謝，
拜拜。